Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the Comic Sand podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Jumps, and this is the podcast for people who are interested in comic book stories and comic related things but don't want to read the comics. Today I wanted to talk about one of my favorites. His name's Venom. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Venom as a character, or maybe even the Tom Hardy movie, which the sequel is coming up soon. But I want to go over more of his comic book lore and more specifically the most recent run of Venom, which is a 35 issue run, takes place over the course of about 3 years. And the author is Donny Cates. He did a great job with Venom and expanding his lore into the greater Marvel universe. The artist, the main artist, because artists do switch it up sometimes, is going to be Ryan Stegman. But there were other artists involved in some of the issues, but the main art is done by Ryan Stegman, and he did a great job with that as well. But so before I get into it and talk about this 35 issue run and all of the amazing storylines that went into it, I do want to go over, Venom, the basics. For people who have no idea of Venom's origins, how he came to be, I will just go ahead and start with saying that Venom is a symbiote, and that symbiote needs to bond to a host in order to become Venom, or there are other symbiotes that go by other names. They all need hosts, and this is actually Venom #1 of the run that we'll be talking about, Donny Cates' run. But anyways, so originally the way that the Venom symbiote, before it was even given a name, was introduced was by Peter Parker, Spider-Man, in a different storyline called Secret Wars. He did end up on a different planet and brought the symbiote back with him after mistakenly thinking it was just a regular suit that was cool. It gave him extra strength, made it to where he couldn't run out of webs. It was just, they were organically produced by the suit. But the thing is that after a while of using the symbiote suit, he started to realize that it was affecting his mind, making him a bit more aggressive with his villains and even just his loved ones. He was starting to become kind of a jerk. And if you've ever seen Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire, you kind of get the origins a little bit. And so after he ends up taking the symbiote to the Fantastic Four to be studied by Reed Richards, or Mr. Fantastic, they do find out that the symbiote is a living being, sentient, with emotions, thoughts, all of that, and it's actually a symbiotic relationship with its host. And after finding that out, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, he does attempt to remove the suit, but the suit is not having it. The suit has loved its time with Spider-Man and does not want to let go. So we do find out that the suit's weaknesses are fire and sonics. And so Spider-Man goes with the better option of trying to remove it with sonic vibrations. And if, again, going back to Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire, they actually have the most accurate depiction of how the symbiote was removed. Spider-Man does go up to the top of a church tower with a large bell and begins to ring it as loud as it possibly can ring. And in doing so, the symbiote is in agony, and it starts to, kind of melt off of him. He's tearing it off of him too, and it ends up falling down to the first floor. And keep in mind, the symbiote loved Spider-Man. It wasn't necessarily, trying to be evil towards Spider-Man. The symbiote just had kind of a natural affinity towards bad things. It needs to feed and stuff like that. Not that Spider-Man ever fed, but we'll get into now that at this same time that Spider-Man is tearing off this suit and it's falling down to the ground floor of the church, Eddie Brock is actually at the church, I believe praying to God, because he's just lost his job, I believe lost his wife or girlfriend. I can't remember exactly at the time where they were, but and it was all due to Spider-Man outing one of his news articles, because he works at a newspaper, I believe the Daily Globe. Spider-Man outed one of his reports as false. The information in it was wrong, and so he lost his job due to that. So Eddie Brock, he's hating on Spider-Man right now. He's not taking responsibility. All of his anger is pointed at Spider-Man. And so being at ground level as the suit falls down, it actually ends up bonding to Eddie. And now the suit feels betrayed by Spider-Man. And so once the suit bonds to someone who has that same hatred towards Spider-Man, that's how Venom is born. And so Venom begins to terrorize Spider-Man. If you're familiar with Spider-Man's Spidey sense that keeps him out of harm's way a lot of the time, the symbiote bonded to Eddie Brock, or Venom. Venom is actually able to get around his Spidey sense. So at any time, Venom can sneak up on Spider-Man and Spider-Man would have no clue. So really one of his most dangerous enemies, if not the most dangerous enemy, depending on, what story arc we're looking at. And so pretty much it just, he's a long time running villain of Spider-Man for a while. They go back and forth. They have all, their conflicts and whatnot. Ultimately, ending with Eddie Brock being put in prison by Spider-Man. At this time, the symbiote is not supposed to be connected to Eddie. At least that's my understanding of it. And so Eddie, in his prison cell, is actually right next door to another prisoner named Cletus Cassidy, who's going to be being played by Woody Harrelson in the upcoming Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. And Cletus Cassidy, he's a psychopath, murderer, serial killer, redneck dude. So Woody Harrelson, great casting. And so one night, it's discovered that a piece of the Venom symbiote was still bonded to Eddie. At least, again, that's my remembrance of it. This is one of their classic storylines. And so that piece of the Venom symbiote ends up giving birth to another symbiote. That symbiote then goes to the next prison cell over to Cletus Cassidy, and bonds with Cletus Cassidy, becoming Carnage. Again, Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. You can see where they're going with this. And so, if you thought that a symbiote bonding with a guy who just really doesn't like Spider-Man was a bad thing, and it was, then this new symbiote bonding with a psychopath, lunatic killer is the worst thing that could have happened. And that's proven to be true. He definitely creates a lot of issues for Spider-Man. There were times when Venom and Carnage would team up against Spider-Man, and so that, two villains is worse than one. And so after a time, Eddie starts to kind of change his ways and become more of what they call him a lethal protector, and decides to be more of a vigilante, anti-hero type. And in doing that, he ends up teaming up with Spider-Man against Carnage. That's, story for another time, but just to, bring you up to speed, he then he fights crime. He fights crime in his own way, but he does fight crime. At a certain point in time, he does get the Venom symbiote does get removed from Eddie. Eddie's kind of neither here nor there for a while, and the Venom symbiote is then bonded with Flash Thompson, who, if you're somewhat familiar, he is Peter Parker's bully from high school, who then joins the military, becomes a decorated soldier, and actually has his legs blown off in war. And so when the government got hold of the Venom symbiote, they wanted to try and use it to make a super soldier, and they figured Flash Thompson, he's a good candidate. He made 180 from who he was in high school. Obviously, for a while he was who they called him Agent Venom. He was a just completely good guy. What they did was they made it to where the Venom symbiote was kind of docile, and was mostly just used as a tool, and didn't really have its own thoughts and whatnot. But then after a while, those thoughts did come, to the surface. But he begins to be more heroic. He decides that Flash Thompson is, he wants to help him fight crime, and they even go into outer space and become a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy for a bit. So that was pretty interesting. Ultimately, the symbiote does get removed from Flash. Flash actually ends up dying. But then in that symbiote being removed, he does find his way back to Eddie. Eddie then, that's actually, that is enough to bring you up to speed. That is where this new run of Venom picks up. Donny Cates' Venom, like I said. And again, this is a great run of Venom. When it starts, we find Eddie kind of living in a rundown apartment. If you were to see him on the street, you would think he was just like a homeless heroin addict or something. He's really, the bond between him and his symbiote it seems to be hurting him more than it's ever helped him. And so another aspect of this connection is that Eddie's starting to have these horrible nightmares, just symbiote related. He's seeing symbols in his head, hearing voices and whatnot, and that's where he's at when we start issue number 1 of Venom. Not long after, he's kidnapped or abducted by an agent, Rex Strickland, who reveals that he was actually a member of a platoon in Vietnam that were bonded with symbiotes. So this actually, it's what we call a retcon, or retroactive continuity, where they do change the backstory of a character to unlock new possibilities with their story. And so this would be a retcon of Spider-Man bringing back the first symbiote, when in fact there were symbiotes already being used back in Vietnam. And so Rex Strickland, when he abducts Eddie, he was actually looking for Flash Thompson because he wanted a soldier to help him with, turns out that the other members of his platoon have been held captive by the government and studied and whatnot. And so Rex was looking for Flash Thompson to help him get his soldiers, his brothers, back from the government and help them out. And so he settles on, using Eddie to do it, Venom, as we know. And Venom does go after the pods that they're being kept in. And we find that these symbiotes, they've been kind of possessed, I should say, and they look very strange. And I should say that actually in issue 1 or 2 maybe, Venom's symbiote even kind of got possessed for a moment, and it looks really weird. It's got like a spiral red on their face, red veins all over, and that's how the soldiers in the pods look. Eddie does try to save Venom. He does try to save the soldiers, but ultimately that doesn't work. And he does find out that the possession and, the symbols he's been seeing, the voices, it's the god of the symbiotes. This is a brand new character created by Donny Cates. His name's Null. That's Knull. And he's god of the symbiotes. He's been trapped on the planet or in the planet where the symbiotes come from, and they act as a sort of cage around him. He's the god of the abyss. And so what he does is Null is sending these messages pretty much foreshadowing his freeing and getting to Earth and taking over, not even just Earth, but the galaxy, the universe. And so Null, so that's what Null's up to. He's kind of just in his cage, but what he does manage to do is send a giant dragon covered in symbiotes to Earth, and Venom ends up fighting this symbiote. In doing so, he does get connected to what they call the hive mind, and being connected to that symbiote hive, it unlocks new powers. He gets these wings, and he's able to fly. At a certain point in the run, he's able to use turn his arms into cannons, pretty much, like biological weapon cannons, which is really cool. And there's more to that, and I believe we'll see them expand on that in the future, in new runs. But so what happens is he defeats that dragon, but then he knows that that's not the end of it. He then ends up finding out that he has a half-brother named Dylan. Yeah. Really, he ultimately ends up finding out that he has a son. His son is Dylan, and he had been being raised by Eddie's abusive father as his own. Eddie goes to kind of reconcile with his father that he's estranged from, but I won't go into a lot of that. But what ends up happening is that Eddie takes in Dylan, and then finds out about the fact that he's actually his father, and we find out that Dylan has powers where he's able to actually control symbiotes, and that's kind of it's vague at first, and they kind of build up into the next big event in the Venom series, which is called Absolute Carnage. At this point in time, Carnage is supposed to be dead from a previous series called Venomized. And that, again, that's a story for another time, but just so you understand, at this point, Carnage is dead. Nobody's worried about Carnage, but prior to Absolute Carnage, we see that there is a cult that has dedicated itself to resurrecting Carnage and carrying out Null's will. So Carnage ends up getting resurrected and goes to war with anyone who's ever worn a symbiote, which at this point it's been a lot of people, not as Venom, but a lot of different people have had, or superheroes, villains, they've had a symbiote bonded with them, and even if it's just for an issue or a battle, it's happened to a lot of people. Wolverine, Captain America. I'm not even going to name them all. It's a lot. And so that what they end up trying to do through that absolute carnage is really, it's just they're trying to defeat Carnage, get his plan foiled, and they ultimately do. That's Absolute Carnage, story for another time. But then, so after Absolute Carnage, Venom goes to an island with the rest of the Carnage symbiote with the intention of burning it to ashes and making sure that it can never come back. This is the same island that actually, back when Venom was a villain and terrorizing Spider-Man, he brought Spider-Man to this island to terrorize him some more. And so there was a lot of parallels between that storyline and this one. And it was a pretty short-lived storyline, and then directly after it, Eddie and Dylan end up in an alternate universe where everyone has bonded to a symbiote. That it's just commonplace. The Avengers are all bonded to symbiotes, and it's kind of just like a tyrannical kind of world run by this symbiote controller, it's king called Codex, who's later found out to be the alternate universe's version of Dylan, Venom's son. And so that ties into, the powers that he's realizing that he has, and they're worried that this is how things are going to go for him, is that he's going to turn into Codex in the regular universe. I'll tell you right now, hasn't happened. But then after he gets back from the alternate universe, pretty quickly we get into, it's the King of Black event, or King in Black event, sorry. And that's where Null finds his way to Earth. All the heroes in the Marvel universe. This is a wide Marvel event. It wasn't just constrained to the Venom series. In this event, Null is on Earth, and he's pretty much he's going after everyone. He just wants everything to be either dead or symbiote, and so that he can control the universe. At a point in that series, Venom gets, or I guess I should say, Eddie gets the Venom symbiote torn from him, and the Venom symbiote is then absorbed into the hive, and Eddie's consciousness is also in the hive. Because that's how it works. The consciousness of people who have been attached to a symbiote, when they die, they end up, or at least when Null kills them. I don't know. There's a lot of fantasy magic type stuff. But what happens then is that Eddie finds himself in the hive as Eddie, not as Venom. And he runs into Flash Thompson, who is, like I said, he was dead, but he was bonded to a symbiote, so he is in this hive as well. And so they end up helping each other, and Flash actually, he turns into anti-Venom at some point in the comics previous to all of this. And it's instead of the black skin with the white symbols, it's a reversed. And so what happens in King in Black is he leaves the hive as a giant anti-Venom dragon, one of the dragons that's being used by Null. Because at this point, I know I mentioned the one dragon before. There are thousands upon thousands of dragons now, Venom-like dragons, symbiote dragons. And so now we're seeing a symbiote dragon, but it's an anti-symbiote. And so he's helping. Then the Venom symbiote in the hive finds Eddie in the hive. They combine again, and Eddie becomes a giant Venom, like bigger than the dragons, and starts taking on people. Ultimately, and I'm sure you could have guessed, he does beat Null with it's a sword, the only sword that can defeat Null, the all black Necro sword. And so, wait, I might actually have that wrong. I know that there was a weapon that, and I'm sorry, there's a lot of issues, but there was a weapon the only weapon that could kill Null, and Venom was able to get it, and he kills Null, and in his place becomes the King in Black, the god of the symbiotes. That's the end of King in Black, and then they ended with a supersized Venom issue, and that pretty much sets up what's going to happen next in the Marvel universe, the Venom lore. What's going to happen next, and we see that Eddie has now set up in his home that I believe it was the Fantastic Four set him up with a home so that he could have this set up where he can link into the symbiote hive, and he's everywhere. He's himself, but he's also he's talking to the Avengers in one place while he's also having lunch with Spider-Man at a diner and explaining to Spider-Man not to feel so bad about bringing back the Venom symbiote because there were symbiotes on this planet long before he ever did that, which is a big relief off of Spider-Man's back, because if you know anything about Spider-Man, he's really self-critical, and so that was something that, kind of like a weight off of his shoulders after decades in the comics. But as far as the chronology, it had been a while of him beating himself up over it. And so we also see that that Eddie has now aged a lot through all of this, the toll that it's taking on his body. He's now an old man. And what happens is Venom ends up bonding to Dylan, whose symbiote controlling powers were removed during King in Black, which I glossed over that, but he doesn't have the symbiote controlling powers anymore, but now he is the new Venom. He dons, the Venom symbiote, and instead of webs, he goes with chains on his arms. What they're doing, I think, is removing Venom from the Spider-Man lore, because like in the movie and I guess I should say that's Donny Cates' Venom. I hope that I explained it in a way that was interesting to you guys just as much as it was interesting to me, because I loved every single issue of it, and all of the twists and turns, and just expanding Venom into more than just a Venom comic, but he is now a central point of the Marvel universe. And so, that being said, I think what they're doing with this new run of Venom was making it to where Venom's origin is not dependent on Spider-Man. Because if you watch the first Venom movie with Tom Hardy, Spider-Man is not part of that whatsoever. He's not at all part of his origin, how he came to be. They completely had to do it without him because of the fact that Spider-Man is being used by Marvel, the MCU, and so they couldn't link those stories together. And I think it's it's a cool choice. We'll see how things go with Dylan Brock being the new Venom, kind of with a fresh start too. He doesn't have to think about the bad things that he's done, because he hasn't done any bad things. Like, Eddie was always struggling with what he had done in the past. And so I'm excited. I hope that it sounds, interesting to you guys again. I did end up talking about Venom for longer than I thought I was going to be, so I won't go into the other stuff that I was thinking about talking about, such as the Loki Disney Plus series, which has been really great so far. I'm not going to spoil anything right now. I also did see Black Widow just on opening night, it was really good, and on the next episode I can definitely talk about those two things. Let me know, in the comments or however, what you thought of the show. If you have any questions about anything that I did talk about, because I know it was a lot, and it's hard for some people to keep up with everything that's going on. I may have, missed things that I was thinking about, but didn't actually say. And so any questions, drop them in the comments. Any critiques, drop them in the comments. If you can't hear me well, let me know. Also, any questions about anything comic book related, drop them in the comments. I do want to make this a little bit more of an interactive experience, and it helps to know when I'm talking about things that you guys are interested in. So if you have any questions about upcoming movies, like Shang-Chi, that one's going to be really great. Marvel movie coming out, really martial arts related, and looks like it's going to be really good. And so, any questions, like I said, comments, anything you can think of, compliments. I love compliments. You can drop compliments in the comments. Well, I'm going to stop rambling, and again, this has been the Comic Sand Podcast. I've been your host, Dylan Jumps, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in.